Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Creemee Cast on VDCTV. We are live here at Bean Studios, and I have a very special guest today. Very excited to have Matt Musgrave with us. Welcome, Matt.
Hey, thanks for having me, Paul. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming down. I really appreciate you coming down. Matt had showed me a little bit about the podcast stuff, maybe, 2 months ago or so, and showing me a little bit about how this stuff works, because I know you've been doing a podcast with the Associated General Contractors.
Yes, we have. We have the Construct Vermont podcast series that we're working on. We don't have quite the same budget that you guys have. You have like a much nicer studio than we do, so you've got the good stuff here. But we crank one out once a week, and it's generally based around construction type of information. This week we did one on the new rules that are coming out related to signage and work zones and stuff. So yeah, it's fun. It's always an adventure. You never know if something's going to work or not work.
Yeah.
There's a lot of trial and error.
Oh, believe me, I know the feeling, and we really appreciate your kind words on our studio here. I don't know about much of a production value there is, but we're getting there. That's for sure. Yeah, it takes time, as you probably know. Yeah, it's pretty. It can be intimidating, honestly.
Well, it's a whole new world. I mean, I had fortunate enough to have a little bit of a background in working with computers, production software, and audio equipment. So that kind of helped. In the video world, I'm still picking things up.
Sure.
But it's an interesting. It's an interesting new way that people are able to reach out and create content, generate information for people that are out there, and it's with whether you're using YouTube, you have a website you're hosting it on. It's a platform. A podcast is something that is for some people, and I'm one of them, a much more appetizing form of entertainment, because you get to pick what you want. Right?
Sure.
So like I'll get home, and I'm well known at home for watching mountain biking podcasts or disc golf podcasts and such. So and you don't have the commercials. You don't have some of that same broadcast formatted television or radio. So it's a really neat way to get out there and identify new talent, and you're picking up the torch and running with it. So that's good.
Yeah, well, we're definitely. I mean, I'm having fun doing it, and I think that is a lot of what it's about, and it gives people the opportunity to talk. I think we both know this in the world that we're involved in. Not a lot of people want to talk all the time, so this is a good opportunity to do that. So I know you've talked a little bit about this with me before. You're a DJ outside of your professional life.
Yes, that was a hobby I picked up at a very young age, I think, and I want to just make a distinction when because I had someone call me the other day and try to book me for a wedding, and that's not really what I do.
Dang.
So, it goes back to when I was a kid. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and I grew up during kind of like the evolution of hip hop music, where people were using 2 turntables and a mixer in ways that nobody had ever seen it before. And just like I've done with my podcast studio, when I was a little kid, I started going to garage sales and getting audio equipment. I would get speakers. I mean, there was like at one point I remember, and this is incorrect wiring, by the way. This is not how speakers work. But I had like daisy chain speakers all through my bedroom, like all 300, like before surround sound and stuff.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know if you ever heard of a movie called Juice.
No.
Oh, you've got to watch this. This is an old Wesley Snipes movie. Tupac Shakur's in it. It's about a bunch of young kids in New York, and one of the young kids happens to be a talented DJ. And when I saw that, I was like, that's really cool, because that was like when you first started seeing people cutting and mixing. Like if you didn't live in a city, you had no access to it. We weren't doing it in the nightclubs in Burlington.
Sure.
I was a teenager at the time, so the first pop culture thing that really came out was that movie, and you got to see them scratching and mixing, and it was pretty amazing. So I got involved with it very young. Hip hop was something that was growing, but one of my friends actually, Jason Punt, Eric Heiss, opened a company called Flexstone Records in Burlington, and they opened it out of a love for reggae dancehall music, which I think has a different name now. I think they call it reggaeton now.
Okay, yeah.
But in the old days, they used to call it reggae dancehall music. It was it was this infusion of the old Bob Marley and that kind of reggae music with modern hip hop beats.
Okay.
And so my friends got involved with a record distributor out of New York City. I could take an hour on this, so you can tell me when to stop.
No, this is look. We're here to talk about politics and a little bit about what you do down at AGC and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, who's Matt Musgrave? You know, why not?
So, early on, that stuff started to come out. That music started to come out. And my friend, like I said, they teamed up with a distributor out of New York City, who was the only distributor in the continental United States that had direct contact with people in Jamaica that were producing these little 7-inch records. And I don't know if you've ever seen a little.
No, I have. I actually have a couple of them around here, laying around. Yeah.
Well, what they would do, and it was interesting because so you'd have these different record labels, and I couldn't name them all now, but they had all these different record labels, and what would happen is a producer would come in and they would make a beat, and then they'd have 5 or 6 singers come in, and they'd each record singles on that beat. So you'd have essentially the same song and rhythm, but with all these different singers. So then it became that they started shipping those up as little 7-inch records, and the backside of them used to be the instrumental. So you could even find people locally who would get up and sing and rap over it. So that was really cool. And we started, me and a couple of my friends started this little crew of DJs in South Burlington, Vermont. And we were, by the time we had like a real setup and gear that we could take out, probably sophomores in high school, juniors in high school. And all of a sudden we became, not the organizers, but we became the talent at all the high school parties.
Okay.
All over Burlington and Chittenden County. So we would come out, we'd bring out our stuff. We didn't know, but it was kind of and you know what? It's a good way to segue into what we'll talk about later. But being out there, coming out and performing to groups of people that you didn't know. I grew up in South Burlington and Shelburne, so I went to South Burlington High School, and I then graduated from Champlain Valley Union High School. But this going around to different schools parties, I started meeting people in Burlington and Essex and Colchester that I would never have had any contact with.
Sure.
And actually, you're the guy that's up at the front of the room.
Yeah.
So you're getting some attention. So
it
was fun.
I'm sure it was. That sounds like a blast.
Yeah, and we did that reggae thing all through high school, and for me, that switched a little bit. And I'm just telling like I said, not a wedding DJ, right?
Yeah.
So it always has been around my personal taste in music, and as I kind of grew out of the reggae music and I grew out of the hip hop music when I was young, I became very infatuated with electronic music, and they didn't really call it electronic music. That came in the 2000s, but in the 90s it was like house music, breakbeat music. That was it was stuff you'd hear in a warehouse or you'd hear in a nightclub, and I got very interested in learning how to play synthesizers. So I kind of transitioned out of that like hip hop scratch world to more of music production and mixing that different genre of music, and I actually took it on the road when I was 18 or 19. I started getting booked because this was, probably, and it's interesting. It's a huge contrast, my personal and my professional life.
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
But that was back when they had these parties that they would call raves.
Yes.
They don't do that anymore. As a matter of fact, Joe Biden outlawed them.
What?
Yeah, he was the one that, I want to say it was 1998 or 1999, as a part of a larger crime bill, they included that anybody that was calling a party a rave could potentially have federal charges applied to them. Now that's why you go to festivals if you go to one of those things.
Sure.
So I got into doing that, and I was like 18 or 19 years old, and people were paying me $1,000 to drive from Burlington to Boston to play records for an hour. And I thought that was like the coolest thing in the world. But at the same time, I also realized I was growing up, and I maybe wasn't into the party lifestyle as much as some of those other people were. So for me, it was like, I like the music stuff, but I'm not going with you on the part. I can't go be a party boy. That's not my. I don't have that luxury. I had to become an adult, and I had to go into the professional life. So I've never let that stuff go. And in fact, at home, I probably have, nobody knows where I live, so I'm happy to say I probably have a $20,000 studio.
Wow.
Of different synthesizers, recording equipment, and guitars and stuff like that. And then, I've probably got 4,000 or 5,000 vinyl records that I still own, and the turntable set up and all that stuff. So I still do this for fun. I actually DJ'd a party for the eclipse.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
It was a private party with adults, and they just wanted to hear some music, so I came out and did that. But while I was doing all that when I was really young, I didn't have the luxury of not working.
I know what you mean.
And I had to make the decision, what is it that I wanted to do? And I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but fortunately, I grew up around a bunch of people whose families were in the real estate business. So,
Okay.
At 17 or 18, I got my first job working as a real estate courier and marketing person for one of the top agents in Vermont. And that was like an eye opener, because it's, they talk about opportunities in the world and what people have, what they don't have. I think a lot of times it comes down to who your mentors are.
Sure.
And for me, actually watching somebody who is the best at what they do,
Yeah.
the number one in the marketplace, hands down, nobody who's even close in second place. I got to learn from her and her husband, that was their business partner, a lot of stuff about marketing, some of the most amazing trainings that you'll ever get in dealing with personalities is when you're in the sales world. That was like when you're in the real estate or any other sales
Sure.
world, you have to learn about how to talk to people, because there's really four. If you read, there's a book called the Platinum Rule.
Yep.
I would check that book out. It actually talks about the 4 different kind of predominant personality traits, and that the lesson there is that, and this is what I learned from Nancy very early on, was, if I talk in my tone, and at the time I was 19 years old, if I talk in the way that I'm going to receive, in a way that I can kind of get, like 3/4 of the time I'm pissing people off around me. Like, I had no ability to talk to engineers. I had no ability to talk to people that were directors. I got along fine with people that were like socializers and wanted to chat, blah, blah, blah. So it early on and that was the introduction to my professional career, was being around this person. So I've always looked at how to be the best in what you do, and not a cocky way, but in a way that you're trying to be there.
Sure.
It's not that I have to beat somebody else. It's that I beat myself. And, one thing that's funny is if you're competing with yourself, you're always pushing yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's something that I do in sports. I'm an avid golfer. I'm an avid disc golfer.
Yeah.
I don't go out on the field to play against other people. I go out to beat my old score.
Sure.
And that's what I learned from that mentor that I had early on, was to go the extra yard to make sure that you are doing better than you did last time. And that's just that first lesson that I learned. And while all that was going, I decided I was going to go to school for a while and learn about how to program computers. And I did a bunch of things at the same time. Ultimately, the computer thing, I didn't love it. It's something that I think a lot of people have a great career in. It's something that's fun. It's a lucrative career.
Yes.
But I couldn't sit there and do that all day long.
No.
So I came back out with a real estate license and got to work. I was selling real estate at 23 years old, and that was during really the peak of the market in the early 2000s, and it was amazing.
Okay.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I learned a lot. So I've just talked for a long time.
No, that's okay. That's what you're here to do, man. I think I can relate very much to what you're talking about. When you were, say, 19 years old and you don't know how to talk to certain people, and a certain percentage of people, no matter what you say, you're going to piss them off. Mm-hmm. I can relate to that. I might know a little bit of something. I might be learning some of those lessons right now.
You never stop.
Yeah, well, that's good to know too, right? It is kind of like it's an everlasting battle, and between you and yourself, ultimately. I think that's a really interesting point, because a lot of the time I find myself comparing myself to others and saying, oh, look at what they're doing. Oh, I got to be doing that. Well, am I doing better than I was yesterday? And if I can say yes to that, 9 days out of 10, then great. Yeah. But that's not always the case. However, so you've talked a lot about what you did back when you were younger, working as a DJ and doing that up in Burlington. And you say, like, oh, my private life is or at least your past is a little bit different than what you do now professionally. I mean, I don't know. I've been to a few AGC events, and they seem to be pretty fun. Sometimes I would even say they're kind of a party. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we try to do that. I mean, I learned at AGC, what my role is there. I think we all have different identities in the places that we work, and we do have fun. We have a good time with our members, but it's important that that's preceded by the absolute professional delivery of our services to our members prior to getting there. It's always great to celebrate, and we've been on this track of winning awards for the last 3 years. This year we won one award this year for our overdose prevention program. We won 2 national awards last year. The year before that, we won a membership growth award from AGC of America before that chapter of the year. So we're constantly pushing that envelope. It gets tiring.
Yes. Yeah.
We're constantly pushing that envelope. So when we do our things, and you might be talking about one of our burger and brew events.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of specifically.
But that burger and brew thing is a time for us to get our members in. They've finished their work for the day. We've finished our work for the day. We just come together and grab a soft drink or beer or whatever you like, and have a good time and share stories, because that, when you look at it, and we, as you've noticed, we invite our elected representatives to come down as well.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for relationship building, and they're a family. The people that I work for, the construction professionals that are out there, they're a family with each other. It's an interesting perspective that people get, because they see our members as competitors. So they see us and they're like, well, you all are out there competing with each other. Well, that's true, right? So they're out there, they're competing with each other, and they win a bid. But all of a sudden, so company A wins the bid, and then they're going to hire company B as a subcontractor.
Sure.
And then all of a sudden, the next one, company B won, the company A is hired as their subcontractor. So they're constantly doing this with each other in different ways, because you have companies that specialize in different sectors of the construction business.
Absolutely.
So it's really important that they have a working relationship, but they also have a camaraderie relationship, and that's where we got out and we'll have fun with our golf tournaments. We're actually having a disc golf tournament on June 12th of this year.
Oh, cool. Where's that going to be?
Smuggler's Notch, which is
that's
it's
awesome.
a world-class
Yes,
disc golf club. They actually, the Pro Tour, that's their last stop of the year. It's the world's championship. So
yeah, I've played disc golf like 3 times, and one of them was at Smuggler's Notch, and that was, I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful course.
Yeah. So we do have a good time, but I know what my role is there, and I said that earlier. I'll explain.
Sure.
So they look at Richard. He's the safety guy, right?
Yeah.
We just hired Ben Osha on board. He's our safety and training, our safety and workforce development director. That's how they see him. Deb, she's boss of everybody, right?
Sure.
She's helping keep the wheels running. And then our members and the employees that come through the building, they see. And we put a window into my office for a reason. They see me as someone that's out there swinging the bat for them in the legislature, protecting their jobs, keeping them safe by promoting policies that will, a good example is work zone safety, which we could talk a little bit about today. But they see me going out there, and it's all about perception, right?
Sure.
And one of our friends, who's another trainer, was in on a Friday, and it was a day we didn't have any trainings going on. I didn't have any appointments, so I wore a pair of jeans and a flannel in, and I wear a suit to work most days.
Yeah.
And it was a huge reminder, and that's what it was actually when I said you're constantly learning. It was one of those things. I had this aha moment, and I was like, oh, I actually failed today wearing the clothes that I wore. Because Tim, he's one of our trainers. He's a great guy. He came up to us. He says, "I've never seen you look like that before, man. What's going on with you? What's going on?" And I was like, it actually does have to do with how you present yourself sometimes. Yeah. And I mean, that. That's why I wear suits to work. That's why I shave in the morning. That's why I take a shower in the morning. But you don't realize that sometimes your uniform sets you apart from what you're doing. Mine certainly is wearing a suit.
Yes.
So I thought that was interesting. It's just one of those things. You're constantly learning. You're constantly growing.
Yes.
If you stop doing that, that's when you need to look in the mirror.
That's yeah, absolutely. You gotta ask yourself, why am I not paying attention to those things. Actually, it's funny that you say that because about apparel, because I wore a hat on one of the interviews a couple days ago, and I had a handful of people say, "Why were you wearing a hat? Why did you have a hat on?" I didn't even think twice about it, but people point that stuff out, and you're like, okay, well, what are they expecting? What am I supposed to be? What do they expect out of an interviewer? And I guess, maybe I shouldn't be wearing my hat, and that's a level of professionalism that matters to people, which as a 24-year-old, I wouldn't think anyone would care.
Well, you're looking at, you have people, right? And they have an expectation of what you're doing and who you are.
Yes.
And, I'll stay nonpartisan on this. It's whether you're like watching like Lex Friedman,
sure,
or you're watching Jon Stewart, right?
Yes.
They're total polar opposites. If Lex didn't show up in his black suit, if Jon Stewart didn't show up dressed professionally for his piece, that's going to change the tone of what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And it's, it doesn't mean that you have to dress in a particular way, but you dress to who you are and what your audience is expecting.
No, definitely. I can see that more clearly now. So you mentioned, there was one thing you just mentioned about the overdose prevention, and you guys won an award for that.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that what you guys won an award for was somewhat out of the ordinary, like what you guys were doing. So what exactly are you guys doing?
So Reed Wabi came to us, I want to say it was a year and a half, 2 years ago.
Okay.
And he said, we've got a problem. And at the time, he was working with a construction company as a safety manager. And he says, we've got a problem on its way. Well, what's the problem? This was, mid-pandemic. This was at a time where we had extremely rapidly growing number of people that were overdosing on fentanyl as it was coming across the border. This whole thing like really struck during COVID. Everybody went home. The drug dealers didn't.
Yeah.
And so we started, he notified us. He said, well, we have a problem. It's incoming. And the problem is construction workers are going to start dying from overdose. At the same time, we also identified that there is mental health challenges that are out there in the world, not just within construction, but within all industries in life. If you sat at home through 2020, 2021, watching television, everybody walked away not feeling good.
Oh, no. Yeah.
So here we are back out in the world, and Reed says to us, we've got an incoming problem. We're going to have to deal with this. And Richard, his dad, and I were like, well, what are we going to do about it, right?
Sure.
So he kept convincing us, and we had a member who lost a daughter, and they put together a program called Jenna's Promise and Jenna's House.
That's right.
Yeah, the Tatro family up in Morrisville. And what that did was it created a home for, and all the contractors threw in on it. It was pretty amazing, the community that came out to support the Tatros. And they put together Jenna's House, Jenna's Promise. And we're now looking at each other saying, we didn't think there was a problem. We now know that there's a problem. And so we brought in Reed, and Reed came in and he brought he brought a small team of people with him, as a matter of fact. And that team of people included people from the Vermont Department of Health, some people that are members of ours that do employee assistance programs. And we worked with the state government, and through, I want to say this was almost exactly a year ago, we started distributing Narcan kits and self-harm kits, or harm reduction kits as they called them. And so we distributed 14,000 hits of Narcan, or doses of Narcan, or whatever you call it, and 8,000 of the harm reduction kits. And the harm reduction kits included fentanyl test strips, locks for guns, overdose, like if someone overdoses, you have to give a mouth-to-mouth, so they give you like a plastic guard.
Sure.
And resource information and stuff like that. And we started distributing it.
Yeah.
And you know what happened? We had a group of contractors that came in, and we said, all right, we got a bunch of these things on the back table over there. After we get done, why don't you all just grab a bunch of them, put them in your truck, and take them with you to the job sites? Sure. And these were owners too, so owners and supervisors. And everybody said, well, we've never done anything like this. Why would we do this? Are we picking up liability? There was a lot of concern about getting involved with something that they'd never got involved with. And we basically, the answer was, Richard said, well, if you're going to have somebody up on the roof, you're going to hand them a harness, right?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you, knowing that someone might die of an overdose, why wouldn't you hand them something, a tool to help cure that problem, knowing that it's there? Because we can't be in denial about it. And there was one individual who was pretty adamant about the fact that it was very uncomfortable for them.
Sure.
And that's the best way for me to explain it.
I think I know what you're saying. Yeah.
Very uncomfortable with it. And we just said, take them. They took them. And we got a phone call about a week later from that individual. You think I get a couple more of those?
Yes, I do.
I had someone go down. We saved one person there. Then we got reports. We had 2 more people go down on job sites that were saved by these Narcan hits. We understand that there was more that the health department can't tell us about because it's of confidentiality, but we happen to know anecdotally through some of our members about 3.
Wow. So
all of this stuff is happening. That then exponentially grew, and this program, Reed then created VTHC is his consulting company that he just started. He left the construction company, started a consulting company, partnered with us, and then we put together a much larger and broader campaign to go out and make sure these were on every single job site that's out there. And we did a lot of education and outreach, and most people don't realize that 20% of overdose deaths involve someone that has some connection to the construction industry. It's also the same with suicide.
Wow.
So people are killing themselves, and 20% of them are working in the construction industry or have close ties to it. So we identified the problem. We created a system to get out there and work with people. And I mean, Reed and I did a couple of podcasts here a couple of months ago on how to deal with mental health, how to identify suicidal people with it's professional language that I'm not good at, suicidal ideations. So that was the program that we put together, and we sent it in as we submitted it into the Associated General Contractors of America, and they actually picked it up, and we went to San Diego last month and picked up the national award for it. And
wow.
It was pretty amazing. But go back 6 months before that, we had won another award in September for our advocacy and election campaign program that we had done during the 2020 election. And 2022.
Okay.
Thank you. So we won that award. So we went out there, and Richard and I actually had the opportunity to get up on stage. We won the award. Richard was invited to come speak at another event about safety. And we brought up this topic of overdose prevention. And it went over everyone's head. These are people like top professionals from all over the United States that are operating AGC chapters like ours. And it just was like this. And everybody had the same question: where does our responsibility come into this?
Sure.
Is there liability?
It's a risk.
Shouldn't we just find a place that they can go and deal with it on their own? No, the answer is no. But within 6 months, that same cadre of people, we're now celebrating. We won an award, and it took them looking into their own memberships.
Sure. Asking
the questions to identify that there is actually a problem. So that's what that was about. It was a real high moment for us to win the award, but it's not an award that you want to win.
No, it's one of those things where it's a problem that needs a solution, and I wasn't aware that was the case. Those numbers that you mentioned about the number of again, and what did you say again? The number of people that the percentage of overdoses that happen there, how much of a percentage is
20% of those? So you can connect the dots to construction. Not that they're at work doing it, it's that they have a job. And I think you could make the argument it's a high level injury business, so oftentimes it could be accidental based on prescriptions.
Sure.
So it's not necessarily people are sitting in their car in their vehicles at lunch shooting up or something like that. It could be they were given a prescription and they accidentally take too much. So that's one of the possible things you can attribute to why, but I'm sure there's a number of reasons, and we can talk a little bit about that, like mental health. Why do you think these issues exist within the construction world? I mean, I'm sure there's not one answer, but well, it's one of those things. it's a hard job. It's
That's
a
right.
dirty job.
Yes, it
You're
is.
constantly busting your butt. It's up early in the morning. You're working long days. People get hurt. It's a high percentage of injuries. That's one of the things that we focus on is injury prevention, because it's not that someone falling down and breaking their leg or falling off the side of a building or something like that can't be. You can fix someone's leg, but there's oftentimes after that injury, there's going to be issues with that person. Sometimes it could be getting on the drugs that they were giving them to deal with the pain that was acute at the time. Sometimes it could be ongoing issues that they deal with. Sometimes it's mental health issues that come from, I can only imagine, work. I'm petrified of heights. I have no interest of climbing ladders, but I do sometimes. So you look at that, and then you look at the job sometimes. I mean, it's a great career, and I don't want anybody listening to think that construction isn't a good place, because people overdose in the medical field, people overdose in schools.
Yes.
I mean, so it's not indifferent. That's a stat. That's a real stat. But it's also, it hurts people's hearts when I have flaggers that are doing their job in Burlington, for example, as they had 3 weeks ago, and someone gets mad because they had to stop for the construction zone, and they jump out of their car and they assault the person.
Yeah.
And they get back in their car and no one pulls them over. I mean, that's a problem.
That is a problem.
You think about that. You think about, as you look at these people that are building Vermont.
Yes.
They're creating the roads, the buildings, the bridges, the infrastructure. These are the folks, when we talk about climate and all that stuff, these are the folks that are building the climate resilient projects. They're the ones that are putting up the solar arrays. They're the ones that are putting up the turbines that we don't do anymore. But it's tough, and they don't get the appreciation. So that's maybe another answer. Why do we do our burgers and brew events? Why do we celebrate the people that work for us? Because they're our most valuable asset.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that the rest of the world sees them that way.
No, it's kind of what I'm getting at, actually. I think that's why you're having a lot of these issues in the construction world. I think people take it for granted, all the things that we need to have a society. It is a society, so we need to have roads, we need to have safe construction sites, for that matter. I mean, it sounds like that's part of what this is. That's a lot of what you guys do is advocacy in the State House, but a lot of it is also trainings and safety, and giving the contractors you work with the tools that they need to be successful. And there's maybe it's a good place to be for you, because there's not a lot of people doing that, at least in Vermont, and actually some might even argue they're doing the opposite, but that's a whole different subject. So you spend a lot of time in Montpelier. I've been down there quite a bit this year. I'm learning the ropes, if you will. What do you do down in Montpelier?
So my title is Deputy Executive Vice President at the AGC, but I also go by a Government Affairs Director. And what a Government Affairs Director does is manage the political communications and advocacy for the organization. So I work with our board of directors and our government affairs team to determine what the policy priorities are for our industry. And I also identify the risks and challenges that other people may bring in that are offensive to us. So I work with our board. I work with our government affairs team. The government affairs team consists of a government affairs committee that's appointed by the president of the board.
Okay.
And we also have myself, of course, and then we have our lobbying team, which are William Scholdice and Associates, which is one of the top lobbying firms in the state of Vermont. I would argue the top. Thank you, Heather and Emma and Sherry. The team works with the Government Affairs Committee, and Scholdice, they're in the building all day long. They're monitoring.
Oh, yeah.
I come to the building about every day. And so my job generally is observing, watching what's going on, tracking legislation, tracking the bills that are priorities to us, tracking the bills that could be challenging. I've got 3 classifications for bills. I've got the ones that I like, I got the ones that I hate, and I have ones that I'm willing to negotiate on.
Sure.
And so what I do is, let's just take a step back, and I'll tell you what my next 6 months is going to be, because that's really the beginning of what I do, and that's working with campaigns. So We're going to activate our Run to Win campaign program again this year. It was a successful program last year. We supported 40 candidates. 36 of them were elected. We're going to start off with robust fundraising with our members to build up a political action committee. For those that are out there in cyber world, a political action committee is a legal form of organizations being able to support candidates financially for their campaigns. It's not money that goes into their pocket. It's money that we can give to them that they have to report how they spend it. It goes towards things like palm cards, advertisements, and things like that. So we build up our war chest, or whatever you want to call it. And then we start identifying candidates, right? So you have 180 candidates at the local level in the state house, and you have 6 or 7 constitutional officers that are statewide candidates. We identify the people in those, and we're a nonpartisan organization.
Yep.
We support every political party so long as they support us.
Absolutely.
So we go out there, we try to, and one of my jobs is analyzing the data that comes out of the prior legislative session, so that I can look out there and see, oh, well, legislator A, they went against us on that. Note,
Yeah.
That one supported us on this. Okay, put a check mark next to that.
Sure.
So identifying the candidates that are out there that will be incumbents. And right now there's about a 96% incumbent reelection rate.
Okay.
So we have to identify who's likely going to run again. Are there going to be vacates? And last election, there was 30% was vacated. So there was a lot of open races, and we had to work really hard this time of year to identify who was going to run. So once we have identified people, we do a candidate training course. That's a 4 or 5 session 3-week course that we talk about, the basics, like how to operate with the Secretary of State's office per your campaign, meaning people have to do campaign finance reporting. Yep. And they have to, fill out their candidate questionnaires and meet their deadlines. So we help them with that. We help them develop messaging. We help them learn how for them to go fundraise for their campaigns and how to build a network around them so that they can do it. All the while I'm still out here fundraising for supporting candidates later on. Then what happens is it takes a little while, and typically you wouldn't find organizations getting involved in primary campaigns. That's very, very rare that'll happen. That being said, this may be one of those weird years that we get involved a little bit more with the primary season, because there are a significant amount of Senate seats that will be up.
Yep.
And so that means we're going to need to do some vetting out there, because essentially in most of the districts, whoever wins the primary is going to win the election.
Yeah.
Because Vermont's obviously got a super majority of Democrats and progressives. You look at your Burlington areas, they don't even run Republicans in those areas. You go out to the Northeast Kingdom, it's a different story. You go down to Rutland County, it's a different story. So it's really regional how this works. So we're looking at a couple of primaries. Unfortunately, I can't share with you.
That's fine. I'm not looking to. You've said a lot, actually.
But again, we're not. It's not about party. It's about who's going to be a contractor champion.
Sure.
And that's one of the things we're gonna focus on. So what happens between now and the primaries, or during the summer while the primary happens, we're out there doing the burger and brew events, and we're inviting these folks to come in so that they can pitch their case to our members. They can get to know our members a little bit better so they understand our business, because people really don't understand our business. I had actually a candidate came before us last election and said, well, we're not going to get along on 3 different things. It's like, okay, well, what are those 3 things? We, of course, had our board of directors in the room. This is an interview for a statewide candidate. And, without giving the person away, they basically were like, well, we're not going to get along on climate change stuff. We're not going to get along on, women's rights issues.
Oh, interesting.
And childcare. We're not going to get along on that either. So this was 2022. There were a lot of people that were still on Zoom. And what happened between 2020 and 2022 on Zoom was all of a sudden people don't show their video anymore. You just see initials.
Yeah.
So all this individual saw was a bunch of initials. And unfortunately, the individual didn't identify the fact that half of our board of directors are women. And they do, in fact, sometimes have children.
Yeah.
I also am aware that some men also are parents, they're fathers.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
childcare is an issue for us. Half of my board of directors are women, and one of the guys that was in the room is actually one of the top contractors for doing climate change mitigation work. So it's like, well, this is why we have to educate people that are coming in so they understand what we do, because what that person thought was that we're just digging ditches on the side of the road and paving.
Well, I'm sure they thought that you were just, destroying the environment and wasting resources and doing horrible, nefarious things that these dang developers are doing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm being facetious, but
Well, yeah, no, they forget about the fact that it's probably one of the careers that has the best outcomes for people at a very young age, because you don't need to come in and rack up $120,000 of debt.
yeah,
And you come in, you're making more money than a lot of the grads do at that age. So when I was selling real estate, I never really understood this. How are there like 21, 22-year-olds coming in, putting down money and buying houses while they're driving brand new pickup trucks? Now that I work in construction, I know.
yeah. Well,
that's what they did.
That's just it. I mean, I ran for office in 2022, and that was some of my platform was like, you can actually go work in the construction field and make very good money right out of high school. Actually, the gentleman sitting in the corner over here producing the show with us today, who's first time we've had a producer, we're really excited. He's one of them. And I think that's something people take. They overlook it coming out of school. I know when I came out of school, everybody's like, you got to go to college. Nobody's in the school advocating necessarily that you should go work in the construction trades.
Yeah. I think that everybody has their own path, right? And I don't think that going to college or not going to college is for everybody. It's everybody's personal choice. And in fact, I have people that are working out on job sites today that have master's degrees.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
In a field not even related to what they're doing.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Well, they found something that they wanted to do. I mean, it's a different. It's not a. I don't know if I'd say it's a different breed of people that want to do this work. But there's just a sense of accomplishment that people get out of building something and walking away from it that you don't necessarily get sometimes when you're sort of running the treadmill.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think that a lot of the times, at least what I know from people who are in the workforce, not just in the construction world, but beyond, they're saying sometimes it feels like I have no idea what I actually accomplished that day, and I don't really know exactly what I did, which may be their problem, but I guess the point is you can walk away from a job site knowing I did that today.
Yeah.
And that feels pretty cool. And I mean, you can't say that about everything, I mean, even like doing this, like this is great to do a show like this, and I'll probably watch it later, but it definitely, you're wondering, is the work that I'm doing making a difference? Well, the answer to that question when you walk away from a job site.
Yeah. Well, you got to do stuff that you like to do. And if it's doing podcasts, if it's running an excavator, that's your personal choice. And people create their own pathways, and so that's why we had to educate these candidates. So we spend a few months with them before the general election, before the primaries, that they need to learn and understand who we are before we can give them support.
Sure.
And then once the primaries happen, then we identify key races, and then we work with candidates. And like I said, last time we supported 40 candidates in 40 different races, and we won 36 of them.
Well, there you go. So if you're
not us, they won there. So.
Well, yeah, well, of course. Well, if you're a candidate out there, a potential candidate out there, keep this in mind.
Yeah, no, pay attention to the show. I'll let you know when we're going to do our trainings, and you can certainly let people know out there, or just feel free to have anybody call me.
Sure, I definitely I'm sure we can help you get in contact. So we've talked a lot about, I mean, really really great stuff. I guess the big question that I have for you, leaving this conversation here, what do you first of all, what are you looking at heading into the future in the next election cycle? You've talked a little bit about that, but what do you foresee as some potential challenges as we go forward for your organization, for your candidates, for the work that you do in the State House? What are you looking at? What does the future of Vermont look like?
So this is. And I'm going to answer this as apolitical as possible. This is an interesting year.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to go into the details on the property tax debacle, but there is a property tax debacle that's going on.
Yeah.
That was created by legislation that passed 2 years ago. And unfortunately, they haven't found a way out of it. So what people are looking at, and they've tried diligently, and it is what it is. There were several issues that came up. So what we're looking at now is a 15% across the board, right as of today, expecting a 15% across the board residential property tax increase for the state portion. And on the non-residential, they're looking at a 20% increase. And so it's an interesting, you asked me what I see happening.
Yeah.
And the reason why I bring this up is this is the crux of what the next 6 months is going to be following. Because what you have on the residential side, most Vermonters that own homes on a mortgage qualify for what's called the property tax rebate. And what that does is essentially ties the state portion of your property taxes to your income. So anybody making $107,000 as a household or less fits into that program. So this 15% that we're talking about is somewhat income sensitized for those people.
Sure.
Non-residential property includes rental properties.
Yes, of course.
And whereas there is a little bit of a spiff or a deduction for landlords, their costs are going to go up 20%.
Yeah.
So most people aren't aware of what the capitalization rate for landlords in Vermont is, but if you're in Burlington, it's 2 or 3%. If you're outside of Burlington, it's like 4 to 6%. A capitalization rate for people that are out there is if I spend $100,000 to buy this house, if I make $2,000 a year after all of my expenses, that's my capitalization rate.
Thank you for explaining that because I didn't know. People that are out there, do you mean me? Is that?
Yeah, it's the same as it's the way you look at investments, right?
Sure.
So all of a sudden you're going to go tell landlords, I'm raising your property tax by 20%. The landlord has a 2% capitalization rate. They don't have room to absorb that 20% hit. So it's going to get passed right to their consumer, the renter.
Yeah.
Who in Vermont is, those are folks that can't afford to buy houses.
That's right.
And so there are going to be letters that are going out in July from landlords. I have friends that are in a landlord association, and a number of them are, in fact, landlords. They're going to be pointing out that the property tax increase is why their rents are going to be going up, and that they should contact their legislators and find that out. And that's what's going to cause not only those folks, but the homeowners are going to be doing the same thing. And let's take a step back. It's the beginning of this year and the beginning of the 2022 election season. The University of New Hampshire did a poll, and we all, if you were to open up one of our magazines or something like that today, childcare or and climate or blah blah blah. This is what they're saying are the priorities. Well, that poll, which was a nonpartisan poll, said that Vermonters' top 3 priorities were housing, affordability, and public safety.
Interesting.
So the housing debacle and the property tax debacle, that's 2 of those things.
Yes, it is.
I don't want to get into public safety, but I don't know that you've reported on anything that's increasing that public safety, have you?
I would say we've probably reported on the opposite.
So those 3 priorities are on the majority of Vermonters' minds. And those are the priorities that they're going to be asking about. And you're not going to find that there is a major political shift in Vermont and all of a sudden, we're going to be, red state or something like that. But you're going to see districts flip.
Yes.
You're going to see likely flips. And again, it's not, if someone's not satisfying their local district, they're going to get elected out of office. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat, you're on the hook right now.
Yeah, and people are like kind of pissed off. I mean, from what I'm hearing, I was at the governor's press conference a few weeks ago, and somebody asked him, Governor, are you receiving more letters and communications and this type of stuff from constituents? And he said, well, I'm not receiving more, but we're receiving a lot more fear. People are very fearful, and I think that's a word that can invoke a little bit of anxiety to people. The word fear, right? Like I don't mean fear for just the reason of being fear, but people are the reason of being fearful. But people are genuinely feeling like they're feeling that they're not being heard by their legislators. I think, and I think that's something we definitely are seeing in Montpelier, and people are fearful is very. I take that word kind of seriously because, when people do get fearful, they make decisions that they otherwise might not. And so when you're talking about districts flipping, you might see people voting differently than they ever had. And I like you say, we're looking into our crystal ball trying to figure out what's going to happen. I mean, there's no way to really know, but you can kind of base it off of what we're hearing and what we're seeing. Yeah. And so anyway, well, Matt, I don't really know, I'm sure we could talk all day, but I know you need to get going. And I very much appreciate you coming down to Northfield today and checking the place out. And
yeah, good job. Good work.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're getting there. I mean, I'm looking at your feed right now. It looks pretty good, but there's, like you say, it's a never-ending battle.
What is the feed?
Oh, you look fine. It's just a little, I don't know. You'll see. You look good. Don't worry. You don't look that bad. You look well. Anyhow,
they've always told me I have a face need for radio, not video.
It's funny you say. Somebody said that to me today. I was talking about trying to get somebody in Montpelier to come on the podcast, and he said, "Oh, I did radio for years. I love doing radio." And people always told me that I had a face for radio. It's like, no.
I actually was a DJ when I was in high school. I was lucky enough to get my radio license up at UVM. So I was able to, it was a 2:00 on a Friday evening, 2:00 in the morning, I guess it would be Saturday mornings, they gave me a time slot. And I came in and played horribly loud music, and then I switched it to a political podcast and got kicked off. Or not a podcast, but a political talk show. Because at the time I got really into politics when I was young. So,
okay.
So I started having political discussions, and they were being piped out of the radio into the airwaves, and they were ending up in the UVM library.
Oh.
And people were complaining.
I wonder what you were talking about. Well,
I can't remember what I was talking about. That was like Bill Clinton years.
Oh, those were back in the days when like Rush Limbaugh was still on the air.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, thank you so much, Matt, and